Hello and welcome to the Light Up, Don't Burn Out podcast. I'm Tamara. I'm your host. We can call this podcast Light Up for short. I am so excited to be here and to finally be birthing this podcast. I've been thinking about it for months, for longer than I'm willing to admit. And I've launched a bunch of things since. You can find me on Instagram, on Facebook. You can find me on a column as well, Au Journal Le Soir. It's a column in French. And I've been craving a platform that would let me speak for longer and go into more details into the stories. So here we are with the Light Up podcast. We talk everything spirituality, everything to do with burnout, with inner wisdom, yoga, life lessons. And if you're a recovering either overachiever or people pleaser, this is your space where we learn to still have big dreams and big goals, but also fall back in love with the process. So welcome to the Light Up podcast, and I'm really excited for this first episode of many. For this first episode, I want to tell a little bit about my story and who I am to get us acquainted. If this is, one of your first experiences with me and finding out about my work and what I do. So my background is in business, actually. And I did international business in university, and then I traveled a lot, learned Spanish. I speak French. French is my first language. So I've collected languages along the way, as well as living in different countries. That was like the most ecstatic, amazing time. And then I did a master's in project management, worked the corporate life, and with the corporate life is where I burnt out. And now I've been incorporating this other aspect of my personality that is also very real and very present and very much me. It's all things to do with yoga, teaching yoga. So I'm a certified teacher. I'm also a certified wilderness guide. I've been meditating for almost 6 years. What got me into meditating is yoga. Yoga, I think I have over 10 years of just doing it on and off. And now it's a much more present thing in my life. And I coach. So my coaching is actually peer support work. But most people don't know what that is, so I just say coaching because it's just easier that way. Peer support work is essentially helping others who have gone through the same medical or life condition as you have and help them from your experiential knowledge. So you can give them a lot of hope, a lot of tools, and they can just feel understood and like you get it. And that is what I provide to my clients in my coaching containers. I do group classes, single sessions, all of that jazz. And I am just loving the process of creating content these days. So now the podcast is coming out. But enough with the external stuff. I feel like diplomas, certifications, all of that is amazing, but it is external to, it's not as central to a person as what I'm about to say. So who am I as a human? I'm very curious. I'm the type of human that changes a lot. I really resonate with the concept that we all have a universe within us. That rings true for me in my experience. And that is why I allow myself to experience that multidimensionality that lives within me. I love nature. I live in a beautiful house in the forest in Rimouski, a small and mighty town where I'm from. So I came back to the roots after traveling the world, and I love it here. I also love the water. I'm a very simple yet very complex person, highly sensitive, highly intuitive, and those are aspects of myself that I definitely repressed and didn't even know existed until I was burning out or close to burning out. And those things now are some strengths that I harness every day, and I love allowing myself to be more multidimensional. Now, moving on to the core of this podcast, I want to tell you a little bit more about my corporate burnout story. You've got some background, but if you're going through burnout and you're looking for someone to relate to, someone who's gone through it and is now on the other side and who can kind of give you hope, who can kind of, just like I said for peer support work, who can show you the ropes and give you some tools, and then you can try them out and see what works for you, that's what I'm here for, and that's also what I do in my coaching. So moving on to the story. I'm the eldest sister of 3 siblings. I feel like this is a whole TikTok trend. I'm fitting into the stereotype of the eldest sister that took on too much responsibility and is now like revolting against that life. Yep, that's me. I felt the most loved when I was impressing people because my brother and sister are amazing. They required a little bit more attention from my parents. At least that's what I think. And that's why I got attention when I got really good grades. I got a trophy or a medal or a scholarship. So that's how I kind of learned to think of love, even though my parents loved me regardless. That's how I got the most attention, how I learned to kind of thrive. And that and other things created a lot of high expectations on myself. I am one of those recovering overachievers. I do have a lot of energy and love to work and put my heart and soul into projects. It has led me to live an amazing, incredible life, at least for me, what I think. And it is a blessing and a curse. Just like any flaw you can see in someone, there's the dark side, but there's also the bright side of it. So that's the bright side of it. I've lived an incredible life. Going into university, I went to a different city. My parents ended up joining me there, so I got to live with my parents. The money I saved on rent, put it straight into travel. I was in international business in my bachelor's in university, and the reason I went into that, the main one, is that I wanted to travel. And travel I did. Went to Hong Kong on exchange. Most amazing time of my life. Anyone else who's been in Hong Kong, write a comment if you're on YouTube, if you're on the podcast listening platform, just send me a message. I would love to reminisce with you. It's an incredible experience. I also went to Costa Rica and learned Spanish there, living in host families, working, volunteering. And after that, I went to Madrid in Spain to do my second exchange or third international semester abroad. And I was studying in the Spanish group, so that was another interesting experience, doing all of my classes in Spanish. Well, I barely spoke it, but from that point on, I was like, okay, I think I can say I speak Spanish because I passed all of my courses. And more than passed. It went great. So I was a very driven person, and when I had a goal, I would just do it. And no matter how much work it took, I prided myself on being perseverant and going to the end of it. And that worked out for me pretty well until a certain point in my life when things got too overwhelming. Being an overachiever in school and being really involved in extracurricular activities, all of that, big resume with a lot of internships on it, and then all of the travel and the languages, I managed to get the job that I wanted in Montreal. After all of this travel, I was also, up until that point, I had been in a long distance relationship with my current fiance. So we've been together over 11 years now, but after graduating high school, we started dating long distance, 800 kilometers away from each other. And then eventually he moved closer. He was in Montreal at that point. So after 3 years, we got closer. We were at 200 kilometers apart. And for us, that was a lot better. But that's when I started traveling a lot and going to Hong Kong and Madrid and Costa Rica. So we did a lot of long distance for a long time and in a lot of different ways. So my dream was to finally close the distance and get that kind of prestigious job in management consulting. Management consulting is where business schools tend to send their highest performing students. And that was kind of the path that I saw was in front of me. And I was like, oh, if this is the most desirable path, I'm going to take it, because I wasn't 100% sure on what I wanted to do. So I just decided to go for it, and I wanted to keep traveling, but this time being paid for it, so traveling for work. And that allowed me to do that. And I did get there. Be careful what you wish for. So I move in with Raf in Montreal. I live right next door to work, which is very convenient when you got to do a lot of hours, not too much commute time added to that. And I felt like I had everything that I wanted. It started very well, at least from my perspective. It was beautiful. The training allowed me to travel, go to California, and what kind of happened after was that I got staffed on a project in the United States. I was paid like a Canadian. It's not as prestigious in Canada. It's not the same type of salary, but I was on a project that was American, and the people on that project were getting paid like way more than me for the same level. And I had a lot of responsibility for someone who was just coming out of training. And why is that? Because I wanted a challenge. I wanted to travel. I was an overachiever. So I was like, yes, give me the challenge, But little did I know how much of a challenge this was going to be. And I'm not going to go into the details of everything, but let's just say it was a huge flagship project. It was high visibility, high risk for the company. So if things went well, it was amazing. If things did not go well, that was very bad for the company. So there was a lot of pressure just in that type of situation. And then there was also pressure added because I had a role originally that was reasonable for my level. But then I was quickly called to represent the team on site, which was my dream of traveling coming true, which was amazing. And it wasn't traveling to some random destination. Management consultants know it was a good travel destination that I was happy to travel to. So I was like, yeah, I'll do what I can, and I'll give it 100% of what I got. My career was my main focus at this point. I was called to represent my team, but no one else was there on site with me. The people who were representing their own teams on the same project had many years of experience. Let's just say they were like at least 3 levels above me. To give you an idea, there's analysts, which I was at the bottom of the pyramid. There's like interns below that. Analyst, consultant, senior consultant, manager, senior manager, partner, and then there's levels of partners. I was pretty much the only analyst there. If there were other analysts, they were with their team. The other people representing their teams were senior managers. I've seen a few senior consultants representing, but generally that was it. Yeah, there were a few red flags, but until I had truly seen my limit, it was hard for me to tell that this was way beyond me. Like I love a challenge, and that again is a quality, but it's also a flaw. It's a strength and a weakness. Now, burnout culture was real. It was there. Many people who were on this project probably still think that this is normal and they're allowed their opinion, but I kind of came out of that since. This was 2019. I've come out of that since, and now it's unthinkable. It's unfathomable for me to think that some people were bragging about working 300 days in a row, including weekends. And I just don't think that's something to brag about, and people were joking about their kids not being happy with them being gone all the time, and their teenagers being mad at them. And it's like, haha. And even then, at that time, even when I was trying to fit in and figure out the codes, I was like struggling with understanding how that could be funny or that could be something that can be taken lightly. No judgment towards parents. We all do what we can, but for my values and for a way to live my life, I was in this situation, and the path that was shown to me, the path forward, was that. And that was a bit distressing. My goal was never to stay there for my whole career. So that was what kind of kept me there, because I wanted to do a master's. I wanted to do 1 to 2 years and then do my master's, and then we would see, because I had to figure out what my master's was going to be in. And I was just wanting to make money at this point, and I was tired of studying. I needed a break. So I thought the best school there is management consulting for what I was in. And it was a really good school. However, it felt like the demands were getting greater and greater, and my energy was getting lower and lower. And I can remember myself saying to my coworker in Montreal that wasn't on this project, I said, "This project is turning me into a cold-hearted bitch." Wow, okay, now I've got to turn this podcast into explicit, but that's perfect. I was becoming less and less of myself and more of a passive aggressive corporate person, per my last email. Those passive aggressive type of things, because there was so much pressure on my shoulders. Everyone was so pressured around me. Like I mentioned, it's not like every single analyst in that firm had the same experience as me. I think mine was pretty extreme, but they do have a reputation. And like going in, I was already alert at like, I've got to watch myself because there are long hours and it's not a 9 to 5 type of thing. And at one point, there was a major culmination point in the project. I had to work over 30 days in a row, but my learning curve was like steep. My learning curve was steep like this, and I was working long hours and having no time off. And when I asked if we could keep someone on the project that was leaving so that we didn't have to work every single day, my manager laughed. And he said, "We're lucky there's 3 of us. Other teams have 2 people. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna zip it. And working all these days in a row while traveling, while having a lot of pressure on me, while seeing that I'm becoming less and less myself, eventually I asked for help. And the manager I asked for help was not on the project because I was still in Canada. Remember this. So I went through kind of my Canadian resources, doing it by the book and going to the specific manager I was supposed to talk to if anything happened. That person told me to essentially, we can't just change people of projects at the first challenge. But what that person didn't realize was that if I was crying to her on that day was because it was not my first challenge. Like, this was my last resort. And I think that's part of loving a challenge and everything. It's we don't ask for help early enough because we think we're going to get through it and we're going to persevere and we won't need help. So someone else's first challenge was my last resort. And at the same time, that person's job was also to read between the lines and to understand. So there's always both sides to the story. I was basically rejected. Another person tried to help me, but it was taking long. And I don't even think I realized how deep into it I was until I went to see my therapist. I've always had therapists. I didn't have any diagnoses or anything. It was just because I thought I have access to this and this is amazing and everyone has some shit to work on and I do too. So that's why I had a therapist to start with. But at that point, she made me do a test and everything had gone down. Everything. It was like I was burnt out. But she couldn't diagnose me. She wasn't a medical doctor, but she said, the situation is dire, basically. So I traveled one last time. I sucked it up for a few extra weeks, but eventually I just had to quit. And when I quit, I had to give 2 weeks notice. No longer than that. I gave everything I could. And I was out of juice, out of patience, out of tears. I was crying almost every day at work, not because the situations themselves were so intense, but because I had no more resilience left in me. Not only was this experience pretty traumatic as a first experience in the workforce, it was also very traumatic because of the way I left, or the way things got when I left. I gave my resignation letter with a 2 weeks notice, and my hope was just to leave discreetly, under the radar, no one say anything, just like wish me luck and I wish you luck and we're all gone and good. But that's not what happened. My role on the project, as I was saying, was a little bit too big and a little bit too pressurized, and my leaving created international drama. Like, I'm sorry. It created international drama and big emails with everyone who's someone in a carbon copy on that email. And I basically got reprimanded because of the way I resigned. And I was like, okay, this is my fault now. And then I explained to the partner what had happened, why I was resigning, why I did it the way I did, which was actually textbook, because I wanted to back myself so that there wouldn't be any issues. By this point, I was getting pretty accustomed to office politics in this short period of time. So I had backed myself up by doing the things properly. And I actually told them, like, I did everything I could. And to her credit, the partner under which I was employed apologized to me for not seeing the situation, even though I hadn't gone to her directly. I had gone to multiple managers, and she apologized to me. So I think that was pretty good considering the trauma, but yeah, that is the story of how I kind of went down. And from there, I had no plan after this. I said I was going to school, but I did not have anything lined up afterwards. My goal was to do a master's, so I thought, okay, let's just go and do a master's. I applied for a program that I thought was closed in September. I was hoping to maybe do one course in the winter and then another in the summer and then enter the program officially in September, but I actually got in. For January, they were hosting a new wave of students in January, so I had maybe a month to recover. Now we're in December 2019, and you know what happened in 2020. So I'm going to leave it at that in this episode. So, I started the pandemic with my cup really, really empty. My goal was to go back to my comfort zone, which was school. Just a hint. A master's is not rest, okay? I do not recommend this strategy at all, but it's true that school was my comfort zone, and compared to hundreds of thousands of people not getting paid if I made a mistake, getting a B or a C or a D felt like very little pressure in comparison. So I decided to go back to school with only a month to rest, including holidays, the way they were before COVID. So very active holidays, and then going into school in January. Leaving that job, my thoughts were, okay, I parachuted myself out of this for survival, but that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to survive. I almost burnt out. Thank God I didn't. Maybe that's denial. Maybe that was the case. Who knows where the line to burnout is, in my opinion, and that's why I use the term burnout, is because it's not a medical term. It's not a diagnosis. It's something that you feel inside. And I was definitely feeling burnt out, but I didn't want to put the label burnout on it. At least not yet. I was just like, okay, I almost went there. Thank God I didn't. Moving on to the next thing, and I won't get a job on the side. Like, I'm going to focus on having a healthy lifestyle and doing school, which is my comfort zone. And that was my plan. So that's where I'm going to leave you for today. I hope you appreciated this story. My real hope with this is for someone who's going through burnout to be like, oh my God, this part of the story is so similar to mine. Like, I know we always have things that are similar, that themes that come back. And that's why my coaching is so effective, because we connect our stories so easily through these different themes that are recurring between us, and it gives hope, it gives tools, it gives understanding, validation to the person who is being coached by me. And I hope that this podcast episode can give you something similar, a golden nugget for you to leave with, feel validated. Notice that I know the story's a little heavy, but I am just so happy to be able to share it with you. And I am actually really happy that this and everything that unfolded after, so the story doesn't just like go back up from here. I feel like you are getting that. I'm really happy that all of these things happened, because so cliche, but it made me who I am today, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today without that. So I hope I'm honoring my story and honoring the person I was at that time, learning the lessons that I'm now equipped to teach you. And it's just been a really humbling journey. And I thank you for being here. Thank you for being on the Light Up podcast. Like I said at the beginning, you can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, on now YouTube. This will be my first video on YouTube. The famous one that every YouTuber goes back to and refers to as being cringy. And so I hope I do that someday. The easiest way to start working together and most affordable way is to do an intro coaching session with me. It's a 1-hour intensive coaching session that you get for a fraction of the price if it's your very first one with me and we've never worked together before. And from there, so we coach, but then from there we get to decide if we want to take this to a different type of container, whether it's for 3 months or just you want to pay for one-off sessions à la carte. It is up to you. If you speak French and you're in the area of Rimouski, Quebec, my small and mighty town, then I am currently enrolling for l'anti-résolution until January 19th. So this is my program for all winter. We do yoga, meditation, every single session. It is a very small, intimate group. And it's the anti-resolution. It's not because I am anti-resolution per se, but it is because we tend to just have a very pressurized life, if you're anything like me, and then add resolutions on top of it. So add more pressure, more goals, more performance into our lives, when what we actually need is to make space for these new goals and actually make space to actually figure out what we truly, really want, what our true aligned values want us to go for in life. So making that space in our minds and in our calendars to be clear in our direction and listen to our hearts. And from there, setting goals, setting intentions that will actually lead us to a life that is fulfilling, that we can actually enjoy, because you've probably achieved a lot of things at this point already, but you feel like you're trapped in a hamster wheel and not able to enjoy the things that you have created for yourself. So this is what l'anti-résolution is for enjoying what you already have, creating more space, and creating the life you desire, and having the tools to do it. So yoga and meditation every single session. If you want to sign up, just send me a DM. I will put the link to the sign up page. If it's still available, just click there and join the group. It's going to be an incredible experience. I just feel it and I cannot wait. In the next episode, we're going to talk more about how I say corporate burnout here, but it is not just the corporate life that burnt me out. There are so many parallels into other areas of my life. We're going to go into more of that in the other parts of this series and go into more of that healing burnout and the self-care, the self-love, what that really, really means, so that you can come out of it grown instead of come out of it shielded and tougher and harder. What we want is to open up into softness and to come back into flow with life. For that, listen to part 2, maybe 3. I don't know yet. We'll see. And take good care of yourself. I'll see you on the next one.